You have reached the deepest depths of the internet. If it is greatness you seek, you've come to the wrong show. If it's about not wasting time, don't worry, you're never going to get your time back. If it's knowledge you seek, just be aware, any knowledge gained here is going to be minuscule. So now it's time for Accost the Field with Tony Gerdeman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Steal a car and leave.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Accost the Field. I am Tony Gerdeman here with Tom Orr and Shannon Sommers. Shannon, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for allowing me back on after my screw up last week.
You got to be more specific than that. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm wonderful. I am just thrilled to be here and just thrilled that we let Shannon back in. Feels like we should get to write this off on our taxes, letting Shannon be on this podcast.
It is charitable. You're right. You know, I was watching Jaws today, so in honor of Jaws, we're going to need a bigger boat, and let's get to the show. And we will start with what did we talk to, Tom, last week? The quarterbacks? No. The offensive line? Yes.
Offensive linemen?
Yeah, we'll get to that later. I'm sorry. First, I wanted to talk about pretty much what we started out with last week, which was Tuf Borland being injured. Because last week when we talked about it, Urban Meyer was like, he didn't really give a time frame for how long he'd be out. And so when we talked to Meyer on Monday this week, he said September, and I was busy typing and I didn't hear it correctly. And I thought he sounded like he said September. And yeah, he really did say September, that Tuf Borland is likely out until September. Now, the scary thing about that, in my opinion, is he says that normal guys are usually out longer, but Tuf Borland recovers quicker than most players. He's like JT Barrett in that way. So that's why he's saying September, as in, it could be even later than that, but it's because he heals normally, like superhuman, like I guess Wolverine or something, that he'll be back by September. And Tom, the amazing thing that I took from Monday when Urban Meyer is talking about this is he seems like unconcerned that his best linebacker is out of the picture right now and won't be starting at the beginning of the season because there's not time. And I think it says a lot for what is there. I was thinking about it. It's like, say you own a junkyard and you hire some new guy, and the new guy's been there a couple of weeks, and he's like, you know what? I think somebody broke in and stole a carburetor. And you just look at the guy and you're like, look around, look at all this junk we have. Look at everything we have. What's one guy? What's one thing? And he is, Tom, completely unconcerned about the linebackers or losing Tuf Borland and finding some way to replace him. It's like he's got more important things to do because it's almost a no-brainer at this point.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to think of like Keandre Jones as like a rusty old 1983 Buick Skylark, and then you think of Baron Browning as maybe a Geo Metro from the mid 90s that maybe had some rear end damage from a minor accident.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, he is literally surrounded by rusted out linebackers, except in this case, that's a good thing, I guess, because I don't know why we're going with the junkyard metaphor, but I'm trying to play along with the home game here. It was kind of amazing because there are all these positions he's talking about that he's concerned about, and we'll touch on some of them later. But he has concerns at offensive line, he has concerns at wide receiver. No one's really stepped forward at quarterback yet. They haven't quite figured out who's going to play safety. And linebacker, you lose one of your best players, and it's just kind of like, yeah, well, that'll be fine. It's not a big deal. We've got a bunch of those. We got a bunch of those laying around. It's fine. We'll just plug one of the other ones in there. That is, I mean, it's really a testament to how much he believes in some of the other guys in that room, because it's not like they have a whole bunch of returning starters there. They lost Jerome Baker, they lost Chris Worley from there, and it's a lot of younger guys who are in a position now where they have to step up. You just lost a guy who was, basically a returning starter at Tuf Borland. And it's just like, yeah, fine. It'll be fine. Not a big deal.
And he said on Monday that, Baron Browning and Justin Hilliard are at that spot at middle linebacker right now. Baron Browning graded out a champion in Friday's scrimmage. Justin Hilliard was honorable mention, meaning he just missed the cut for grading out a champion. So you've got these two guys who were much more heralded than Tuf Borland, but, that doesn't really mean anything. It's what you do on the field. And so these guys are getting a chance to show what they can do, that they would have still gotten a chance, but they wouldn't have gotten as much of an opportunity because Urban Meyer likes to rest his starters, his established starters during the spring, but he's not going to rest Tuf Borland, or a redshirt sophomore who has started 8 or 9 games in his career. You're going to want that guy out there as much as possible, especially as the quarterback of your defense. So without Tuf Borland out there, you've got Browning and Hilliard now getting those reps, and they're really, from the sound of it, because obviously we're not allowed to watch anything anymore, they're making the most of it. And at this point, for me, it seems like Baron Browning is maybe the odds-on favorite to be the starting middle linebacker for the season opener against Oregon State. Don't you think, Tom?
Yeah, I would think so. If Borland's out, and it certainly sounds like he's going to be out for at least the start of the season, then I think that Browning has to be kind of the odds-on favorite. Justin Hilliard is the other guy who's repping there, but he's played some outside earlier in his career.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's probably a little easier to just slide him outside. We've seen Browning repping with at some of the outside, taking some reps at one of the outside spots this spring. But I would think that Browning has got to be the favorite to land in the middle, because he's got, he doesn't have as much experience on the outside. And, if he's grading out a champion in scrimmages already, and the way Urban Meyer talks about him, he's going to be on the field somewhere. So I would say that Browning in the middle and Hilliard sliding to one of the outside spots is kind of the most likely start to the season right now.
And my question then, Shannon, I'll ask you, what happens if the linebackers are awesome while Borland is out? And he's going to work his way back slowly, but what happens if they're awesome for the first 2 or 3 games? Do you think Billy Davis or Urban Meyer or Greg Schiano will try to mess that chemistry up by putting Tuf Borland in there, who they know is good? But if things are going well, do they want to mess with that? Because we saw what happened last season when maybe they worked all season long to try to find the right pieces. And what if they already have the right pieces in there early in the season? Do you see them trying to force Tuf Borland in there somewhere?
Well, I don't know if it'd be so much force, but I would think in all actuality that if you have him, it's going to be nothing but an advantage, unless he hasn't been able to practice with the guys and get timing with them and stuff like that. So, I mean, if you're just coming into a game without having any kind of, reps with the guys and knowing how they feel and everything like that, and no time in training camp or anything, that would be kind of, hurtful. But, I mean, the way Urban's talking, it doesn't sound like that at all.
And that's the big thing, is that if he's not back until September, there is no camp for him. He's going to get back at a time when, think of it as, it's a little bit different than what Joe Burrow had last year. Because once Joe Burrow hurt his hand, he can no longer compete for the backup spot because it took him so long to get healthy. And by the time he came back, things were, you don't have time to have a backup quarterback battle at that during the season. And so they know what Tuf Borland can do, but he's still going to have to show when he gets back, obviously, that he's better than what they already have. But Tom, you and I think we talked about this on Monday at the Woody. Baron Browning and Tuf Borland are both sophomore eligibility wise. And if they're the two of the 3 best linebackers, or even 2 of the 4 best, one of them is going to have to move. And I don't know that Tuf Borland is the guy who can move. Baron Browning is more suited to play any of the other spots, where Borland, I don't know if he's if he can defend the pass that you need on the outside, even at the will. You wouldn't have to do it as much, at the boundary side. You wouldn't have to do it as much because they don't really have, slot receivers on the boundary all the time unless they're running four wides. But I mean, I don't know that Tom. I don't know that Tuf can play or excel. He can play any of the positions. He's an Ohio State linebacker. I don't know if he can excel at the outside spots like he can at middle.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the best three, that your best lineup of three linebackers probably features Tuf Borland outside. It can feature Tuf Borland, but it probably doesn't feature him outside. I think he is probably a little bit more limited to the middle, which, that's fine. Like you said, you can slide Browning outside to one of those spots. That's not a big deal. He has the physical ability to do that. I don't know that it's that big of an issue, because I think if the linebackers are playing well without Browning in there, or without Borland in there, I think that's a huge luxury, because then you can bring him back slowly. You don't have to rush him back. You can let him take, it's wonderful that he heals magically and quickly, but giving him an extra week or two probably wouldn't be terrible for his long-term health. And also, then you give him a little extra time to get back up to speed on the practice field, give him an extra week, and let him come in those kind of garbage time minutes, where you're going to play. There's going to be a good bit of garbage time against Tulane. So, give him the second half against Tulane to sort of start getting back up to game speed a little bit, and take your time. There's not a huge rush. He doesn't have to be on the field, starting in one of those games in September. They've got the schedule, the pool gets deep pretty quickly this year, because they've got Penn State pretty early this season. And they got TCU early in the year. I don't know that I would plan on Borland being a huge part of that TCU game if he's just coming back in September. But I don't think that's a big issue. I think that they can, if things are going well, I don't think they're going to mess with the chemistry for a while. They're going to let him come back a little slowly and just gradually work him back in. And when they work him back in, then you slide Browning outside somewhere and let Borland play in the middle. Because you're right. That is, everyone can play everywhere, but Borland being in the middle is the best spot for him, for sure.
And as we've seen the last couple of years, they haven't been able to stay healthy at all three linebacker spots anyway. So you need the fourth guy, you need the fifth guy to become the second or the third guy. And I don't think it'll take Borland long to get back up to speed. I mean, it would almost be like a September call up, in November or something, if somebody goes down and he's there to solidify, or he may already be in the lineup by that point, because he knows the defense, and he's already going to be involved likely in special teams. He was the captain of the punt unit, so that may, I'll be interested to see how they manage that without him, or if that's something that he'll be able to do, because they won't really tax him too bad on that. But overall, the versatility at the linebacker position, Meyer said on Monday that Malik Harrison, who has been at the Sam, and Keandre Jones, who has been at the Will, have done some switching, which they're both, super athletic and can play any of the three spots as well. You could basically write down all of the linebacker names and put them in a cup and play linebacker Yahtzee, and any three linebackers, that you get, you'd be like, okay, I'll take these. And I've got Pete Werner, I've got Tuf Borland, and I've got Keandre Jones. And the next guy rolls, is like, well, I've got Baron Browning and, Malik Harrison and Justin Hilliard, and you'd be perfectly fine. There's so many different guys. I think I may have checked this on the offensive line, but there's a number of guys who could be starting anywhere else in the Big Ten, and they're going to be hard pressed to start at Ohio State, but they're good enough to, and it's a luxury. But I wonder, and I may have this later on down, but the versatility was what the defense had last year as well, and it didn't go so well. But I don't, Tom, I don't put that on versatility. I put that on talent and concentration. Don't you?
Yeah, I don't think the fact that guys could play multiple positions was the cause of the issues last year. The ability to play multiple positions is a theme that we've heard from pretty much every unit we've talked to this spring. Defensive ends mentioned it, safeties mentioned it, offensive line mentioned it. That's a recurring thing.
Yeah.
Because, that way you don't get stuck in the, someone's hurt and we have two guys who can play Mike, but we don't have anyone that can play Will. So now we're in trouble because our Will got hurt. If you can just slide guys around and people know the different responsibilities and have, whose skill sets fit the various positions best, and you can, it's not that hard to slide guys around and make them fit. That's a huge advantage, because then if you have a guy get hurt, you don't have necessarily the drop off from the second best linebacker to the sixth best linebacker who happens to be the backup Will or the backup Sam. It's just, okay, well, we'll put the fourth guy back, the fourth best guy in there, and we'll just slide him around and make the pieces fit, make them work. So that's a very intentional thing that they do kind of across the board. And yeah, you can ascribe last year's issues to any number of things. I don't think the versatility of the linebackers is probably what I would chalk those issues up to last year.
Because I'm thinking, like the whole jack of all trades, master of none, maybe applying to that group last year, but I still think it just comes down to doing your assignments. Not that, because even if you're not perfectly equipped to play this spot, Chris Worley wasn't perfectly equipped to play middle linebacker, but just fill your gaps, know your assignments, and it'll look better than it did at times last year. With you talk about the Will linebacker, there's like 5 guys that I could see starting at Will for Ohio State and not having a concern. And I don't even know that includes Dante Booker, who was the backup Will, behind Joshua Perry for 2 years. So the depth is, you think back to the 2012 season when they had to pull Zach Bourne over to play middle linebacker. That was another galaxy ago. I don't know. Can you use galaxy as a time frame? Is that depends on how many parsecs?
We've compared linebackers to rusted out cars and Yahtzee so far. I don't think we're really limited to the bounds of reality at this point.
Good. The quarterbacks is, obviously for me, I'm really interested with the linebackers. That's kind of why I started there. Plus the injury to Tuf Borland. The bigger story, or the more popular story, is probably the quarterbacks. And Myers said on Monday that nobody has stepped up, and he wants somebody to do that, but he's also liking the competition that's going on. And Shannon, I'll ask you, what do you think it'll take for one of these quarterbacks to be the guy to step up? What do the coaches want to see, do you think?
I think they just want to be able to see them on a consistent level, be able to use all their tools consistently. I think that was one of the biggest things that it seemed like when you guys are talking to Urban, or he's doing his presser on Monday, that he says that one guy will step up and the other guy will tail off, and then, he'll step up and the other one tail off, or just between the three of them, there's just not enough consistency between them.
Yeah. And there's that, Ryan Day said he wants to see leadership, and I think the more consistent guy is also maybe the guy that gets followed as well. Remember, like JT Barrett won the job over Cardale because he moved the ball better. And if I think about it now, it's like they never talked about they talked about his leadership, but that wasn't the decider. It was who moved the ball better. And that was JT. Urban gave a number of reasons why the quarterbacks weren't playing well. The offensive line, you've got Michael Jordan out. You've got, they're putting guys in different spots. Isaiah Prince is getting rest, same as the veteran receivers. But do you think the pressure is getting to anybody?
I don't think that it's necessarily a pressure thing. The offense, how many years in a row has the offense been behind the defense during spring ball?
85.
It's just the offense is just going to kind of look like crap this time of year. That's just sort of how it goes. That's a function of a whole bunch of different things, including the fact that, like you said, Isaiah Prince has been sort of limited this spring. No Michael Jordan, so your whole left side of your offensive line, and two of, probably the two most secure starting jobs, those are the guys who are out. So you've got a bunch of guys who are either playing for the first time or starting for the first time, and they haven't played together much, so it's going to look kind of, discombobulated up front anyway. And you're going against, oh yeah, by the way, one of the best defensive lines in the country, so that's not going to help. And he said that, the older wide receivers aren't playing very much this spring, Paris Campbell, Terry McLaurin, Johnny Dixon, those guys. And he said the younger guys haven't necessarily stepped up. So, I mean, there's a whole bunch of reasons that the offense is going to kind of look like crap on and off during the spring. That's just kind of how spring football goes. So I don't know that I would chalk it up to nerves or anything like that. I mean, I think they're all probably, they're all probably, well, you're nervous until it starts. And then as soon as it starts, then you're just thinking about the job at hand. You might have butterflies before the game, but you're not out there during practice with butterflies in your stomach.
I'm thinking, I wonder if it was maybe the quarterbacks aren't as good as Meyer wanted, but I think it's way, way too early for that. Especially when talking about Tate Martell, because we know he doesn't have a lack of talent. I'm wondering if Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins, maybe the reason they're not playing as well as Urban Meyer was like is because they're too tall. They need to be more normal sized like Tate Martell. Do you think?
I think maybe the NFL's had it wrong. So many, all these years, the NFL's had it wrong where it's like, you know what? If they had just given Doug Flutie a little more of a chance, maybe he could have been like the Tom Brady. And Tom Brady would have been, I don't know, how tall is Tom Brady?
6'4".
Nick Foles is tall.
Right.
You know what? Brock Osweiler. He didn't work out very well, and he's like 6'8" or something. So when you think about it, tall quarterbacks are bad, actually.
Well, what I would say is, imagine,
there you go. And you know what? You know what Doug Flutie has in common with Tate Martell?
What?
He won the Heisman.
You're absolutely right. I'm thinking imagine Tom Brady, how good he would be if he was 5'11". Think about that.
Or just listed at 5'11", even better.
Right. Being listed is just good enough.
Well, Russell Wilson's 5'11".
Yeah, Russell Wilson's another one who and I think Russell Wilson could be as good as Tate Martell one of these days.
Dare to dream.
Right. So, Shannon, do you think Tate Martell being more like JT Barrett, the runner, is that why maybe the gap has closed to make it a 3-man race? Just the fact that Urban Meyer loves to run the quarterback. Tate Martell is the best runner. So that automatically, he may not be as good as the other two, but because he's the best runner, it sort of closes the gap. Maybe, is there such a thing as beer goggles for coaches who have beer goggles for running quarterbacks? And maybe you go from a 5 to an 8 and maybe that's what closes the gap. Is it beer goggles for quarterbacks?
There could be that possibility, but I'm also sure that a lot of it has to do with the wide receivers and what's going on with them right now.
Tom, we talked last week that I'm pretty sure we said this on the show, we don't really view Tate Martell as one of the two guys who could win the job. Do we still feel that way? I do. I feel that way, that it's going to be Dwayne Haskins or Joe Burrow. But it says something, and it means something, that they're still splitting the reps up 3 ways evenly, because they wouldn't be doing that if it wasn't a real competition, for all 3 guys. Do you still think it's Joe Burrow and Dwayne Haskins?
I think really I would be very surprised if it was not either Haskins or Burrow starting that first game against Oregon State. I think you're going to have, realistically, it's going to be one of those 2 guys, but giving Martell an equal number of snaps. I mean, first of all, he's got a chance to win the job. I mean, it's not like it's unthinkable that he could win the job. He's got the skills, and the way they talk him up, and the way players and coaches have been talking him up for a year and a half now, I don't think there's any question that he has the ability to play at this level now. I mean, immediately he could play at this level. And the fact that they're giving him snaps, I think, is a reflection of the fact that he is going to play meaningful snaps this fall. He may not be the starter, but he will play meaningful snaps in that first game. I would be very surprised if it was not Haskins or Burrow taking that first snap against Oregon State. But I would be equally surprised if Martell did not play meaningful plays in that first game as well.
And I know everybody talks about Tate Martell's height, but from the time Ohio State offered him, my thought was he must do so many different things, or so many things so well, because you're not going to recruit a 5'9", 5'10" quarterback to play quarterback unless he is special. And so once they're convinced, once the coaches are convinced that, yeah, he can play here, I don't really have any concerns about his height, because he's got so many other things that would negate some of that stuff. And like he's said in the past, like, JT Barrett can't see over a 6'6" left tackle. So what does it matter? Tate Martell is shorter. He can't see over any of the offensive linemen either. How many 6'7" quarterbacks are out there who are successful? Seeing over the lineman doesn't exist really for quarterbacks. It's, seeing windows and being able to throw to those windows and anticipate and, lead, compete, be tough. That was one of the things that Ryan Day said about Tate Martell, is that no matter what you play him in, he's going to do everything he can to beat you. And that's one of those just little things that they look for. I mean, it's dodgeball for Sam Hubbard, Urban Meyer, watching him compete. It's watching defensive linemen or offensive linemen run up and down the court on basketball. It's watching them in different venues and different sports, different, it's tiddlywinks or whatever Urban Meyer says, whatever it is, he wants to see this competition, this competitive spirit. And they see that in Tate Martell. They see it in all of them. But there's more than just height and size to Tate Martell, just like there's more than just an arm to Dwayne Haskins, and just more than just great hair for Joe Burrow. Although I don't know that Joe Burrow needs anything more than that, because it's pretty great. Would you agree with that? I mean, it's pretty special. Yeah,
I talk about Joe Burrow's hair the way that Shannon talks about Joe Burrow's game. I don't think there's any question that he's got. I am the president of the Joe Burrow hair fan club. So the one thing that you didn't directly address with Martell, but you sort of hinted at, is it's not a huge deal that he can't see over offensive linemen, because he's not the kind of quarterback who's going to be standing in the pocket for 5 seconds, just patting the football and waiting for receivers to get open. His game is run around, move around, move the pocket, get outside the pocket, give yourself the chance to make a play with your legs potentially, or get yourself, outside the pocket and, throw to a receiver. Then he doesn't have to see over the offensive line necessarily, because he's probably going to be, he's not standing back in the pocket, patting the football for 5 seconds, waiting for a receiver, standing behind all those offensive linemen. He's going to be moving to get out from behind them. And so then it really doesn't matter how tall they are and how tall he is.
Urban said regarding Friday's scrimmage that Joe Burrow probably had the better day, but Dwayne Haskins closed strong, or something to that effect. And I'm trying to, is it 51-49 for Haskins, or, how it is in my mind? And I don't really have a good feel of where the competition is. So I'll ask both of you guys, like Shannon, on that scale, where do you think it is between Haskins and Burrow? Do you see somebody, even though Urban Meyer says it's neck and neck, do you have a feel? What is your feel on where things are between those two? Like on a scale of 1 to 100, them two splitting 100.
Something tells me that Burrow might have the slight lead based on, you come into training camp last year, and I know we didn't get the true answer, but you even talked about it before when you had the title of the show of, who the backup quarterback is. And there was something that he's had being, with Ohio State or something, that's just a little bit above where Haskins is. Now, did Haskins close it with the Michigan game? I don't know, but if Urban's telling the truth and it's neck to neck, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I'm feeling sort of like I'm leaning towards Joe on a, like a 51-49, but I don't know if I'm there yet. Tom, where are you?
I'm closer than I was a couple weeks ago. A couple weeks ago, I would have probably said 70-30 Haskins. I'm probably closer to 60-40 or maybe even 55-45 Haskins right now. I still think he's probably the guy who's going to end up starting this fall. And I mean, there's a couple reasons for that. I think one of them, first of all, like we talked a little bit about this week, but I think Haskins and Martell as a pair gives you the potential for a more dynamic offense than Burrow and Martell, just because there's not as much of a difference. Those are kind of more similar quarterbacks, Burrow and Martell. Haskins and Martell gives you two kind of very different looks as an offense. So I think that is something of an advantage for Haskins. And, I mean, Urban is obviously going to give Burrow every possibility, every chance to win this job this spring. It's just there's just such a weird dynamic to this quarterback race because it feels like instead of the ticking clock ticking down to the start of the first game or the week before the first game to make a decision on this quarterback, it feels like they have like 2 weeks and they have to have a decision because then, depending on what the decision is in 2 weeks, then Burrow's going to be making a decision. So there's just a weird dynamic to it this year that this just feels different than every other Ohio State quarterback battle that I can remember, just for that reason alone.
We've talked in the past, does Joe Burrow have to be given the job or does he have to be named the starter at the end of spring? And when we were having those conversations, it was a 2-man battle. And we weren't sure, but if it's still a 3-man, everything is equal, I don't see him staying. Because now, you've just doubled the competition that he has to try to defeat. And if he's no closer now than he was at the start of the spring, is he really making the kind of progress or does he have the feel that he's going to win the job when you're no closer than you were at the outset? So I think giving Tate Martell so many snaps might be maybe the thing that sends Burrow away if there is no closure at the end of the spring. Is that crazy, Tom?
Yeah, I mean that's certainly a possibility. I mean, but then at the same time, if you went the other way and you really just made it a 2-quarterback race and told Tate, go sit in the corner and we'll talk to you in the fall. Then you have to worry about, does he want to transfer? Because he has 4 years left. And if he transferred now, he would sit out 1 year and then have 3 years left to play wherever he ended up. So, they don't want to lose him either. So, and all of these guys came in with the pedigree that they're used to starting. They're used to being the stars. And there are a whole lot of places that would crawl over broken glass to get their hands on any of them as a starting quarterback. So it's, all of them are in a position where they want to play. They came here with the expectation they were going to play, and they probably have other options if they want to go somewhere else. So that's a really tricky balance. I mean, Urban on Monday, I was listening to him and it just reminded me of, if you have a job and then you interview for another job and you're really torn, what would I do if I get offered this other job? And, you're almost kind of hoping I hope they don't offer me. And that way I don't have to make the decision. That's kind of
right
where I almost feel like he is right now. He was just he really hopes that someone else kind of almost makes the decision for him, that someone really steps out and is very clearly and obviously head and shoulders above everyone else, because I think this is probably a pretty uncomfortable spot for him, because it's, someone's going to be disappointed one way or the other. And, these guys, like I said, all have options. So if someone doesn't win the job, that you may lose one one of these guys one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just an uncomfortable spot. And it's a weird spot. And this is a quarterback race that I think is unlike anything he's had to deal with in his career too.
Right. And he's already been part of arguably the biggest quarterback battle in college football history already a couple years ago. I've said before, like, I believe Joe Burrow is going to be productive wherever he goes and could have a huge season at Ohio State. But when you mention an offense with Dwayne Haskins and Tate Martell, you got to have a little tingle there because of what they'll force. And we've talked about this before, what they'll force defenses to do, because, you've got to prepare to defend Dwayne Haskins, and then you've got to spend time preparing to defend Tate Martell, who are not polar opposites, but, one end of the hemisphere and another end of the hemisphere, and they can do similar things, but they contrast well and make life difficult for a defense. So it's,
I'm sorry. I don't think you understand how poles work with regard to the hemisphere, because the one pole is on one side of the hemisphere, right, and the other pole is on the other end.
Not at complete ends of the hemisphere, just separate hemispheres. I mean, I agree. You are the geography B guy. I'm just a spelling B guy. All right. All right. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. They're like different, but you could do what. I just think they would be very difficult for defenses to have to sort of combine what they do. Tom, it's just a lot to prepare for. All right.
I don't see that huge of an advantage. If it's Burrow and Martell and you're splitting time between those guys, I don't see that huge of an advantage to doing that. That seems
it's
like
superfluous.
Here's one quarterback who is good at throwing and good at running, and here's another one who's maybe not quite as good at throwing, but maybe better at running. But it's like, here is a slightly different version of a very similar player. I don't quite know if that's that big of an advantage, because I think you're essentially running the same offense with the two of them, and you're probably running largely the same playbook with both of them. I don't see that's that big of an advantage the way that a Haskins Martell thing is, just because, like you said, they're hemispheres apart.
You think of,
as you so eloquently told us.
Well, maybe how about this? If you view the Ohio State offense as a hairy buffalo, and Joe Burrow, let me finish. Joe Burrow is like a gala apple. So you slice that up and you throw it into the concoction, and you've got Tate Martell, who is a Granny Smith, and you slice that up and you throw that. There's not a lot of difference between those two fruits and inside into that hairy buffalo. But then you've got Dwayne Haskins over here, who's a pineapple. You throw some pineapple and now you got pineapple and apple in your hairy buffalo. That's a lot. That's more distinct. You've got to prepare for that. And that's more noticeably different than just two different kinds of apples and a hairy buffalo. Is that okay, Tom? Is that better? Thank you.
I'm just all I'm going to do is just tweet a list of your analogies when we're promoting this week's podcast. We're going to have 1 million downloads. It's going to be great. Can't wait.
And let's move to the offensive line and see what we can do there. We talked to the offensive line on Wednesday, and we talked to some guys that we don't normally get to talk to, including Malcolm Pridgeon, who, my money, is sort of he's one of the stories of spring camp. Urban Meyer has mentioned him. Michael Jordan has said that he's really stepped up, because right now Pridgeon is basically running with the ones, if I recall, with Jordan out. Jordan said he's made the biggest jump that he could think of anybody on the offensive line. And, Meyer said he's basically only been in the system for 2 years, even though he's a JUCO guy, and he's finally stepped up. And he's another guy that is just adding to this. There are so many guards on this Ohio State team right now. Chris Holtman has to be really, really annoyed, I would think. But Malcolm Pridgeon, Thayer Munford, we talked to, is he's really, really mature. He said that he knows Ohio State, knows the coaches want him to start because of everything they're demanding from him and putting him through. But those two guys, Tom, I was struck by those two guys. Pridgeon is going to be a backup this year. We know that, unless he wins the job at right guard. But any of the other guys sort of strike you last week, or your thoughts on either of those guys and what they've done this spring?
Pridgeon, to me, is definitely one of the more interesting stories on the team because he was someone who they brought in as a JUCO, and whenever you bring in a JUCO, it's like, okay, this is a guy who can immediately make an impact on the field.
Yeah.
And then we didn't really see him. He didn't really do anything for a couple of years. And, so then after he's been here a couple of years and you've got some younger guys who are starting to kind of make a push for playing time, it's like, okay, well, he's just one of those guys who's never going to see the field, and you just write him off. And you start looking at the younger guys and figuring, okay, is Wyatt Davis going to make a move at guard or Josh Myers or whoever it is? And then all of a sudden this spring, it sounds like this is the spring that it sort of clicked for him, and he's suddenly all of a sudden a player who's potentially going to make an impact this year. And like you said, they have a tremendous amount of depth at guard. So, finding one more guard is not a huge thing. It's not a huge advantage because you've got Michael Jordan, you've got Demetrius Knox, you've got Brandon Bowen. Those three guys were all starting guards last year because Bowen got hurt and then Knox took his job after he was hurt. But the impact of Pridgeon is now you can slide Bowen outside. Now Bowen's an impact player. Bowen can potentially challenge for playing time at tackle and give you some depth at tackle, which is a spot where you don't have a lot of quality depth right now. So that's a huge, Pridgeon can, even though he's not going to be the guy who's playing tackle this year, just the fact that he has made this leap, he is going to have a serious impact on that tackle battle because that gives you the luxury of sliding a Brandon Bowen outside and not having to worry about, if Knox or if Jordan gets hurt, like who's going to come in? Is it going to be Matt Burrell? Is it going to be Wyatt Davis? Now you have another really good option. And that, that's, we talked about having sort of the luxury of having a lot of good pieces at linebacker to kind of move around and make the different pieces fit in the different spots. Pridgeon gives you a lot, just a little bit of extra security at guard where then you can take Bowen and slide him outside and solve a spot where you don't necessarily have the depth right now.
Yeah, and that's a good point because Thayer Munford even said that Bowen is going back out to tackle. And so those two will be competing for that starting spot. And he said that they've talked about it. They know that one of them will win, one of them will lose, but through it all, they're just going to trade. They'll help each other out each step of the way. But you're right, because they have more depth on the inside, and Pridgeon becoming a viable player makes Bowen not needed anymore inside. Pridgeon came in as a 5-star guy, 5-star JUCO, same as Kendall Sheffield and same as Antoine Jackson. And it was Pridgeon's sort of how long it took him to get the system that had me, we'll wait and see on Kendall Sheffield a little, wait and see on what Antoine Jackson does. The same, even when Larry Grant transferred, he was sort of a non-factor his first year. Even back to the Cooper days, the JUCOs that would come in would rarely ever become impact players in their first year. And like right off the top of my head, I think Kendall Sheffield is the only one that I can think of. But yeah, Pridgeon is finally sort of becoming that guy that they needed him to be 2 years ago. And, one of the things talking to Thayer Munford, he's a true sophomore. The last true sophomore, to start at tackle for the Buckeyes was Isaiah Prince. And if you haven't scrubbed that Penn State game, the 2016 Penn State game from your mind, Shannon, that was a sophomore starting. That's a sophomore starting on the offensive line, and that's what can happen. I mean, Jamarco Jones didn't start as a sophomore. Taylor Decker did, and we all remember that Buffalo game against what's his face? You remember him?
Khalil Mack.
Exactly. So I talked to Thayer. He understands how difficult it is for a true sophomore on the offensive line. So a lot of times it's third or fourth year because before you're asked to sort of step up. But Isaiah Prince talks to him all the time about what he went through and the expectations. And I think Tom, all three of us have talked about Thayer Munford and how we expect very good things from him. Another guy that I think has impressed everybody is Brady Taylor at center. We came into the spring with thinking that it's Taylor, it's Matt Burrell, and Matthew Jones all competing at center. And right now it's Brady Taylor and Josh Myers competing, which tells me that Burrell has gone back into the guard mix to add depth there. And it also tells me that they feel pretty good about Brady Taylor, that the job is his. And now he's competing with the redshirt freshman, Josh Myers, who he will, in all likelihood beat out. And, Michael Jordan told me last week that Brady Taylor is, he's really, his confidence, you can see his confidence grow each week. And he's sort of becoming this. He said during the scrimmage, he was putting guys on their backs, and Brady said, he's got this chip on his shoulder, and then, the whole proverbial chip. But this guy, it's his fifth year. It's his final year. He's been behind Pat Elflein. He's been behind Billy Price. The guy has waited his turn. So, Shannon, I mean, it's sort of impossible to not root for a guy like this, right? An Ohio kid, waited forever, wanted to be a Buckeye, was not the highest recruited guy, 3-star guy, if I remember. But now it's his time, and it looks like things are going good. It's impossible not to root for this kid.
Oh, you're exactly right.
Thank you. Tom, are you rooting against him?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I mean, he was just, if you don't remember the story with Brady Taylor's recruitment, he went to, I think it was Bishop Reedy. It was one of the Bishop Reedy or Bishop Hartley, one of the Columbus Catholic schools that isn't DeSales or Watterson or St. Charles.
Yeah.
I think it was Reedy. But he was committed to Virginia Tech. He was a 3-star prospect. Ohio State did what they do with a lot of Ohio kids, which they kind of slow played him. They were looking at some higher rated kids from outside the class, outside the state, kept saying, okay, we'll talk to you. We'll get back with you. Didn't offer him, and ended up offering him in like mid to late January, like very, very, very late in the cycle. And, he was committed to Virginia Tech. That's a good program. It's not like he was, going to Akron or something, and ended up, but Ohio State was where he wanted to be, flipped his commitment to Ohio State, came here, and then sat. And then it was just kind of buried on the depth chart. When Elflein left, it was like, okay, maybe this is his opportunity. And then they moved Billy Price to center, so he had to wait another year. But at the end of last year, when we talked to Billy Price about who was going to be the center, he said, very definitively, like, that's going to be Brady Taylor. That's Brady Taylor's job. He had seen a lot out of him in practice, and sitting behind two guys in a row who win the award for being the best player in the entire country at that position, there's no great shame in that. So, the first 2 years of his career, you don't expect an offensive lineman to play the first 2 years of their career. And then the last 2 years of his career, he was playing behind the guys who literally were the best in the entire country at the position. So, there's a little bit of an asterisk on hasn't played until his fifth year in this case. Sometimes that's a warning, can be a little bit of a red flag. In this case, not as much, just given some of the circumstances.
They've had some good success with, like Darryl Baldwin and Reed Fragel, who came in their final year and were able to do that. But somebody asked him if they're putting any pressure on him to win the Remington this year, and he said, it's too early for that, but there'll probably be something said about it, later on, because Billy Price said it probably at this point last year. I want my picture next to Pat Elflein's on the wall, and he got it, and I'm sure. Nobody Pat Elflein wants that for Brady Taylor. Billy Price wants it. and Brady Taylor wants it as well. With Isaiah Prince getting quite a bit of rest because they don't need him. He's a senior. He's been starting for 2 previous years now. In his place, Josh Allaby is getting some reps with the first teamers, and they're mixing and matching all of these different guys. And it has me thinking that I can't ever remember a deeper offensive line than what Ohio State has here. And sort of like, the whole linebacker Yahtzee thing that we have popularized. You can almost do that with the offensive line as well, because there's 2 deep. I mean, and we're not even talking about Nicholas Pettit-Frere yet, who could step into the 2 deep right away. Max Ray is in the 2 deep this spring, partly because of injuries probably, but he's also going to be a really good one. Not that I've gone and looked at past rosters. I know it's deeper than anything Jim Tressel that I can remember Jim Tressel having. But Tom, is this the deepest offensive line for Ohio State that you've seen that you can remember?
I think so, because I mean, like you just brought up the Tressel era, like when it was Jim Bowman running the show at offensive line and handling the recruiting there. When you look back at those depth charts, there would be like 7 or 8 names there for the 2 deep across the line. It was like the starting right guard was also the backup left tackle, and then the backup right tackle was also the starting left guard, and then the backup center was also the starting right guard. It was like, okay, we have 7 human beings on this campus who are capable of playing offensive line, who weigh more than 200 pounds. So, okay, I guess this is all we can do. I guess we'll just make it work with this. And that would inevitably bite them in the ass at some point later in the year when someone would get hurt, and then it was like, okay, now we don't have anyone, now we're in trouble. That has not been the case at all recently. I think there's been, you can chalk that up to a significant focus on the trenches in recruiting under Urban Meyer, which I think it's pretty inarguable that they have put a real emphasis on line recruiting on both sides of the ball. And you see that playing out. You see that at last year defensive end. They're just cycling through guys at defensive end and just wearing people out. And on offense, if you lose an offensive lineman, you lose a Brandon Bowen in the middle of year last year. You've got a Demetrius Knox to step in and step right in, and you don't really lose a beat. And that's a testament to good evaluation in recruiting, but it's also a testament to Coach Stud and his development of these guys too. You're not bringing in the 4-star guys and then turning them into career backups. You're developing them, and they're, every class, it seems like there are at least 3 offensive linemen from every class that turn into very productive contributors. And over a 5-year span, because you figure your redshirt every offensive lineman over a 5-year span, even if you sit your first 2 years, that gives you three guys per class. That's 3 times 3 is 9. And then, you have one guy who plays a little early, and then you've got a very solid, good 2 deep at offensive line all the way across the line. And that's, it's such a cliche that the game is won in the trenches, but if you've watched a team try and run an offense with a crappy offensive line, there's a reason that cliche is an old cliche. It's because it's true.
One of the advantages one of the differences between the 2 systems is that Meyer has also, he processes players where like Jim Tressel would have Connor Smith for 5 years, or John Skinner, I don't know, maybe Evan Blankenship. Not only do they not sign as many, they keep them longer. And, we see every year, guys, offensive linemen transfer, be it maybe a grad transfer after a 4th year, but guys move on quicker now, which allows them to overcome those misses. And Urban Meyer has told you, he said it on Monday, talking about misses on the offensive line. And, Jim Tressel they would try to make do with those misses. but they wouldn't play them. But then, you also had times like the 2006 season where Jim Tressel and Jim Wellman had an entire second offensive line and would put them in, but there was probably one or two walk-ons in there. But I just think the depth now is so much. The numbers are bigger. The numbers are better. I think the talent is deeper, and it's only going to get even deeper once the rest of the recruits come in. And he's already got 2 guys signed, not signed, but committed for 2019. So it's there's just a lot of guys, and like you said, it starts up front, and they're not skimping on that, and it shows in the fact that they lead the Big Ten in rushing more years than not under Urban Meyer, lead it in scoring, lead it in total offense. So, I know you guys like to criticize Urban Meyer, but I think he's doing an all right job with what he's been given at Ohio State. Just my opinion.
With the limited resources he has to work with.
Right. Only one waterfall wall? Really?
I like to point out that Tom had an excellent Villanova Wildcats analogy there. 3 times 3 is 9.
Don't understand. Because they shoot a lot of threes?
Yes.
I did understand. All right.
Oh.
Good. Shannon, I wanted to ask, now that you're able to bash Michigan and make fun of Michigan, so were you allowed to start doing that on Sunday at a specific time? Did you have to wait until Monday? But when you were finally allowed, did you just go out on your porch and just let stuff spew into the night, into the woods, and just let everything go at that point?
No, I just waited until the national championship game, and I knew that the humor of the second half was just going to overtake me and make me all emotional. And we, they're the gift that just keeps on giving. So, my hat's off to you, Michigan.
Tell me if this is accurate, because this is what I imagined during that second half, is you just rocking back and forth, not in a rocking chair, just a regular chair, and just laughing and maniacally, and you might have a shawl on your lap, but just
No, just my cat.
I'm glad you were able to enjoy it. Tom, go ahead.
I like the fact that you picture Shannon as the mother from Psycho, sitting in the rocking chair, rocking back and forth with the shawl on her lap.
Well, I can't help it. That's just sorry, Shannon. That's just I assume you run a motel. You live in an old dilapidated house. Is this? So far I'm spot on, right? You've got a motel. Is that true?
False.
False. Okay.
We've established he's a hobo living with him, so that's some kind of housing for.
I just live in a van down by the river.
True. All right, that'll go ahead and wrap. Let's wrap this one up. We'll have another show on Friday with all of the other stuff we didn't get to today. Meyer's looking for leadership. First year that Isaiah Prince is ever going to be a left tackle, even in high school he was a right tackle. Defenses are always ahead of offenses, which we talked about a little bit. Some other stuff and a bunch of listener questions that we'll get to, and look for that on Friday. Shannon, any announcements or anything else like that for this week?
No, I have a Silver Bullets podcast for Thursday. Chip and I will be talking about football again, and I will be able to have my apology for getting my games mixed up with the Burrows and Haskins stuff. So, also,
will you apologize for calling him Burrows?
I don't know why I keep doing that. Yes.
Sorry, I wanted to call you on it before Tom did. It's a contest we have. We keep score afterwards, and I don't like to lose.
I have no idea why I keep doing that.
It's easy. You're not the only one, believe me. All right, that'll cut it.
Maybe because he's so good that there's 2 of them on the field.
It's like, he's singularly multiple, basically. Whereas Martell should have, 4 S's after his name. I was going to say L's, but that doesn't sound...
3.
You don't want to have any L's after your name.
No, it'll be 3 because of the 3 Heismans.
like a superscript, like Martell to the third power. Maybe do it that way.
It's perfect. All right. Let's go ahead and call it a night. Make sure you're checking out the rest of the shows on the Ozone Radio Network. Mondays, we've got Sloopcast. Tuesdays, sometimes we have Sons of Schmidt. Wednesdays, you've got this one. Thursdays, we've got Silver Bullets podcast, as Shannon mentioned. And then sometimes Fridays, we're back at you like we will be this Friday. So go ahead and subscribe to the Ozone Radio Network on iTunes or whichever application you use. And that way you can get all of our shows just dropped off to you. It's real easy. You don't have to go to the post office anymore for them. They just, the post office brings them right to you. It's an amazing thing. So we will call it a night, and we'll talk to you on Friday.
We could steal a car and leave.